I raised my son alone, but at his wedding, my nameplate said, "Low-educated, fake dad." They laughed until the next morning they needed me. To them, I was not a guest. I was not the father of the groom. I was not Vernon Caldwell, the man who had worked double shifts for 23 years so his boy could eat something better than ramen noodles every night of the week. To them, I was low-educated, a fake dad. And the bride's family, every last one of them in designer suits with postgraduate degrees and country club memberships, laughed like that was all I had ever been. It was not a polite laugh. It was not one of those nervous little chuckles people give when they are embarrassed on someone else's behalf. It was a full, open-mouthed, champagne glass in hand, look at this man kind of laugh. I sat there in that banquet hall near Savannah, Georgia, and I did not move. I did not say a word. I had spent 57 years learning that silence is not weakness. Silence is patience. And in my experience, patience has a way of collecting interest. What happened the next morning inside their company's office is something I still think about every single day. Not with anger. Not anymore. What I feel now is closer to quiet satisfaction. But before I get to that morning, you need to understand who I am. Because if you do not know where I started, you will never understand why what happened at that wedding cut as deep as it did, or why my son's response to that nameplate changed everything that followed. My name is Vernon Caldwell. I am 57 years old. I was born and raised in Macon, Georgia, the third of 5 children in a house that had more love than furniture. My father worked the rail yards. My mother cleaned houses on the north side of town. Neither one of them finished high school, and neither one of them ever stopped working. Not once. Not for a single day that I can remember. I did not go to college. I want to be honest about that right from the start, because the people at that wedding table made it the centerpiece of everything. I graduated from Macon Central High School in 1986 and went straight to work on construction sites. I started as a laborer, mixing concrete, hauling materials, and doing whatever the foreman told me to do without complaint and without watching the clock. I was good at the work. More than good. I understood how buildings went together. I understood materials, stress loads, drainage, and the way a foundation needs to breathe. I did not learn it from a textbook. I learned it by doing it every single day for 15 years, with dust in my throat, sweat in my eyes, and my boots planted in Georgia clay. By 2001, I had saved enough money to take out a small business loan and start Caldwell Construction out of a rented office on Poplar Street in Warner Robins, Georgia. We had 1 truck, 2 employees, and a laminated business card I printed myself at Office Depot. That was the beginning. My business partner, Dwight Mercer, came on 2 years later. Dwight had a business degree from Georgia Southern, and he handled the financial side with a precision I genuinely admired. We balanced each other. He understood numbers. I understood the work. Between the two of us, we built something real. Government contracts, residential developments, commercial projects across central Georgia. By the time my son Isaac was finishing high school, Caldwell Construction was doing just over $4 million a year in revenue. But none of that is what I am most proud of. What I am most proud of is Isaac. Isaac's mother, Pamela, left when he was 4 years old. I will not say much about that because whatever pain existed between the two of us is not Isaac's story to carry. What I will say is this. She left on a Thursday morning, and by Friday morning, I had called my mother, arranged drop-off and pick-up at her house, and shown up to the job site on time. Because that boy needed to eat, and the only way he was going to eat was if I worked. I raised Isaac alone for 23 years. That means I was the one at the parent-teacher conferences. I was the one sitting at the kitchen table helping with algebra homework I only barely understood myself. I was the one driving him to baseball practice at 6 in the morning because that was the only time the fields were available. I was the one who held him on the bathroom floor the night he got sick from bad cafeteria food before his 8th grade science fair and talked him into going anyway. He won 2nd place that year. I did not do any of that to earn a reward. I did it because he was my son. A father shows up. That is the whole job description. You show up. Isaac grew into a remarkable man. He got his engineering degree from Georgia Tech. He was smart, focused, and decent in the way truly decent people are quietly without announcing it. He came home every Thanksgiving. He called every Sunday without me having to ask. When Caldwell Construction hit a difficult stretch in 2018, Isaac sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "Dad, tell me what you need." He was 25 years old, and he meant it. He met Camille Worthington at a corporate networking event in Atlanta 2 years ago. She worked in finance for her father's company. She was beautiful, I will give her that. Sharp-polished and ambitious in the way people are when they grow up being told ambition is not a choice, but an obligation. I liked her energy the first time Isaac brought her to my house. She shook my hand firmly, looked me in the eye, and said she had heard a lot about me. I did not realize until much later that she had been briefed rather than informed. The Worthington family was from Alpharetta, Georgia. Not just any Alpharetta. The kind of Alpharetta that exists behind iron gates and manicured hedgerows. Camille's father, Reginald Worthington, had built a commercial real estate and investment firm called Worthington Capital Group, and he had made sure everyone within a 10-mile radius understood exactly how much he had built and exactly how much it was worth. Reginald carried his success the way some men carry a weapon, not concealed, always visible, always pointed in the direction of whoever needed reminding of where the power sat. Constance Worthington Camille's mother was the kind of woman who could deliver a devastating comment with a smile so warm that you would be 3 sentences into your response before you realized you had been cut. At our first family dinner, she asked me what kind of work I was in. When I told her construction, she nodded in that particular way that meant she had already filed me in a drawer and closed it. "Oh, how practical," she said. Practical. That was the word she used. Isaac noticed, but he did not say anything. I noticed, and I did not say anything. We were both trying. That is the thing people do not tell you about the early months of a serious relationship. Everyone is trying not to be who they actually are, because they think that is what kindness looks like. It is not kindness. It is only a delay. The engagement happened in November. Isaac proposed at the Botanical Garden in Atlanta, and when I heard the news, I cried alone in my truck on the drive back. Not from sadness. From relief. My boy had found someone to love. She had said yes. And for one shining moment, it felt like all those years of doing this alone had added up to exactly the right thing. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and that was when things started to shift. The wedding was held on a Saturday in May at the Belfair Plantation in Bluffton, South Carolina. Grand oak trees draped in Spanish moss. A clubhouse that looked like it had been built in the 1800s. And preserved just to remind you that some things do not change. White linen everywhere, a string quartet in the courtyard. It was beautiful. Whatever happened inside those walls, the place itself was beautiful. And my son was getting married there. I wore my best suit, the charcoal gray one I had tailored when Caldwell Construction won a county infrastructure contract. I drove down from Warner Robins with my chest full of something I can only describe as the particular kind of pride only fathers know. Dwight rode with me. He brought his wife Margaret, who had known Isaac since he was 9 years old and had already cried twice before we even got out of the car. We arrived at the reception hall before the ceremony ended to confirm our seats for the dinner. A young woman at the registration table handed us our table cards and name placards, the folded kind that sit in front of your plate so other guests know who you are. I picked mine up and looked at it. Vernon Caldwell, low-educated, fake dad. I read it twice because on the first pass, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were reporting. Dwight saw it over my shoulder. Margaret put her hand over her mouth. I set the placard back down. I straightened it between the silverware exactly as it had been when I picked it up. "Vernon," Dwight said quietly. "I'm fine," I said. Then I sat down. Here is what I want to tell you about that moment, because I think it matters. I was not fine. Let me be honest about that. There is a specific kind of pain that lives inside humiliation. It is not the loud, burning kind. It is cold. It is quiet. It settles somewhere behind your sternum and refuses to move. I sat at that table and I felt it. I felt every year I had spent working job sites in the Georgia heat, while other people's sons sat in air-conditioned classrooms collecting the credentials that would one day be used to measure them against me. I felt every school conference I had attended alone, every bill I had figured out how to pay, Every night I had lain awake staring at the ceiling of a house I was paying for by myself. Not because I was proud of struggling, but because the only alternative was to stop. I felt all of that and I did not stand up. I did not walk over to Reginald Worthington's table and say what I was thinking. I sat there, I breathed, and I waited. The Worthington family entered the reception hall about 40 minutes later. Reginald came first, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first truck. Constance was on his arm in a gold dress that swept the floor and made her look like she had never once in her life been required to clean up after herself. Their extended family trailed behind them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all of them holding champagne glasses with the casual ease of people for whom champagne is ambient, just part of the air. In rooms like that, Reginald saw the placard on my table before he sat down. He did not look away fast enough. He looked at it, and then he looked at me. There was a pause, just a fraction of a second, when I thought I saw something real cross his face. Uncertainty, maybe, or recognition that he had gone too far. Then Constance leaned over and read the placard, and she laughed. It was a short laugh, private between the two of them. But the table around her picked it up the way fire picks up dry grass. Within seconds, 3 or 4 of the extended family members were looking at the placard, then looking at me and laughing in that particular way well-dressed people laugh when they believe they are above being seen. Dwight's hand tightened on the table. Margaret looked at me with eyes that asked a question I was not ready to answer. I kept my face still. I had learned that from my father. Keep your face still. Let them think they have the upper hand. People who believe they have the upper hand get comfortable, and comfortable people stop paying attention. Isaac came in 10 minutes later with Camille on his arm. My son in his wedding suit looked like everything I had ever hoped he would become. He was scanning the room the way he always did when he entered a space, taking stock, making sure everyone he cared about was accounted for. He found me. Then he found the placard. I saw it happen in real time. I saw the moment his eyes registered the words on that folded card. I saw the color change in his face. It was not a blush, not the flush of embarrassment. His face went white, then settled into a stillness I recognized, because it was the same stillness I had been wearing for the past 40 minutes. He walked toward me without breaking stride. Camille's arm was still in his, but she must have felt the shift in his gait because she looked up at him, then followed his eyes to the placard. Isaac reached the table. He picked up the nameplate. He read it once more as if confirming for himself what he had already seen. Then he set it back down, turned it face down so the words were against the tablecloth, and looked across the room at Reginald. Reginald was still smiling. Isaac looked at me and said, not loudly, not for the whole room, just to me, in the voice he had carried since he was about 14, the one that sounded like a man even when he was still figuring out how to be one. Dad, let's go home. 3 words. He was not leaving the wedding. He meant something else. He meant, I see what they did. I know who you are. I am with you, not them. I looked at my son. I looked at the man standing in front of me in his wedding suit, the man I had made scrambled eggs for on Saturday mornings, driven to baseball practice, helped move into his first apartment, and watched graduate from Georgia Tech with a pride so large it had nowhere to go except out through my eyes. And I said the only thing I could say. You've got a wife to get back to, son. Go. He did not move for a moment. Then he nodded, picked up the placard again, carried it to the nearest trash can about 20 feet from the table, dropped it in, and walked back to Camille. The Worthington family had gone very quiet. I stayed for the dinner. I want to be clear about that. I ate my meal. I watched my son dance with his wife. I gave a toast. It was brief, direct, and read from a note card I had written 2 weeks before. And I meant every word of it. I did not make the evening about me. I did not make a scene. And when it was over, I drove back to Warner Robins with Dwight and Margaret in the car. I did not say one word about the placard for the entire 2.5-hour drive. Margaret eventually fell asleep in the back seat. Dwight and I drove in silence for a long time, watching the Georgia night move past the windows. Finally, somewhere past Waycross, Dwight said, "You know, I'm going to handle this." "You're not going to do anything I told him. Vernon." Not tonight. Not because of me. Dwight was quiet for another few miles. Then he asked, "Then what?" I thought about my father, who spent 40 years working the rail yards without a single person with a framed degree on the wall ever asking him what he thought about anything. I thought about my mother, on her knees cleaning other people's floors while her children ate breakfast before school. I thought about every job site I had ever walked onto, and every contractor who had underestimated the man with the dirty boots and the quiet voice. And I thought about how many of those same contractors eventually called me to fix what they had gotten wrong. "I'm going to let Monday handle it," I said. On Sunday, Isaac called me. He did not apologize for the placard. He could not because he had not put it there, and he knew I knew that. What he did instead was tell me the truth about how it happened. Late Saturday night, one of Camille's cousins had felt guilty enough to tell him that Reginald had arranged the placards personally. He had told the event coordinator to print a custom nameplate specifically for me, with those exact words. Constance had apparently suggested the phrase. The event coordinator had assumed, incorrectly, that it was some kind of inside joke. Isaac confronted Reginald that evening after the reception out in the parking area outside the venue. He said it was humor, Isaac told me. He said it was meant to be playful, a ribbing. I said. I told him it wasn't. What did he say? He said maybe I was being too sensitive, that sometimes people from different backgrounds misread social cues. There was a pause. Then Isaac said, I told him I wasn't from a different background. I was from my father's background, and my father didn't misread anything. I sat with that for a moment. Adam, I said, I want you to go be with your wife. Whatever happens next is not your responsibility. Dad, go, I said. I love you. Monday morning, I arrived at the Caldwell construction office at 7:15. Dwight was already there. That was not unusual. Dwight is habitually early, and I have always considered that his single most underrated quality as a business partner. What was unusual was what he had on his desk. He slid a folder across the table when I walked in and sat down. No preamble, no introduction. I opened it. Inside was a proposal. Worthington Capital Group had been quietly pursuing a development project in the Warner Robins area, a mixed-use commercial corridor on the south side of town, something the county had wanted for years. The project was significant, $40 million in development, the kind of thing that gets your name on a plaque outside a building somewhere. And Worthington Capital Group needed a general contractor, a local one, someone with the relationships, the workforce, and the county experience to make the project happen on time. Caldwell Construction had been informally approached about that project 8 months earlier. I remembered the inquiry. I had responded with our standard materials company profile, project history references. Then I heard nothing back. I assumed we were not what they were looking for, and I moved on. What I had not known was that we were exactly what they were looking for. Over the weekend, through a contact at the county planning office who owed him a favor, Dwight had discovered that Worthington Capital Group's first choice for general contractor had withdrawn from the project 2 weeks earlier because of a conflict with another client. Their second choice, a firm out of Macon, had come back with a revised bid 40% over budget. They needed someone. And they needed someone quickly, because the county had given them a hard deadline to break ground. If they missed it, the development rights would revert. Dwight looked at me across the desk. They called our office Friday, he said, while we were driving down to Bluffton, left a message with the answering service. Reginald Worthington himself. I looked at the folder. I thought about that dining room in Bluffton, South Carolina. I thought about the nameplate, the laugh, and the way Constance had looked at me, like I was a service worker who had wandered into the wrong party. What are you thinking? Dwight asked. I'm thinking, I said, that we've been doing this business for 22 years, and I've never once taken a meeting I wasn't prepared for. Are you going to take the meeting? I closed the folder. Reginald Worthington arrived at our office that Monday at 11 o'clock. He brought 2 people with him, a finance associate and a project coordinator. Both were young. Both wore the kind of suits that announce themselves before you do. He walked through the doors of Caldwell Construction, which are modest because I have never spent money on appearances that belonged in the work. And I could see him adjusting his expectations in real time. I let Dwight greet them. I stayed in my office for another 4 minutes. I have a rule about that. You never walk out to meet someone the moment they arrive. It communicates that you have been waiting. I had not been waiting. I had been working. When I came out, Reginald extended his hand. I shook it. His associate set up a brief presentation on a laptop. Project scope, timeline, community impact, county partnership. It was a solid pitch, I will give them that. They knew how to present. When it was finished, Reginald leaned back and said, "Vernon, we think Caldwell Construction is the right fit for this. You know this county. You've got the workforce relationships. And frankly, after the delays we've had with other firms, we need someone who can move." I looked at him for a moment. Then I said, "Reginald, I want to ask you something directly." He nodded. "Of course." On Saturday evening at your daughter's wedding reception, there was a nameplate at my table. The room went completely still. His finance associate looked down at the table. His project coordinator looked at the wall. Dwight looked at me with an expression that sat somewhere between admiration and concern. Reginald's jaw shifted slightly. "Vernon the First, I'm not asking you to apologize," I said. "I'm telling you that I read it. I understood what you meant by it. And I want us both to be sitting in the same room with the same understanding of what it meant before we have any further conversation about this project." He was quiet. "You believe I continued that because I did not attend college, I am less than you. You believe that because I built my company with my hands instead of with credentials, it is not a real company. And you believe that because your daughter chose to love a man from a family you consider beneath yours, she made a mistake." I paused. "I want you to know that I understand that about you. I am not angry about it. Anger is for people who are surprised, and I was not surprised. I have been in rooms with people like you my entire life." Reginald looked like a man who had stepped onto ice and was not yet sure how thick it was. "But here's what you should know," I said. "Caldwell Construction holds active contracts with 5 county governments in central Georgia. We have a 22-year safety record with no lost-time incidents. We have completed 43 commercial projects above $1 million in value, and we have never once missed a county deadline. The man who built this company did not need a degree to understand materials, workforce management, permitting, or the specific way a county commissioner expects to be communicated with." I folded my hands on the table. "You need this project to move in 60 days, or you lose the development rights. I looked up the county filing on Friday. That is correct, isn't it?" Reginald nodded slowly. "Then you need me more than I need you," I said, "and I think we both know it." Silence. Then Reginald Worthington did something I did not fully expect. He exhaled. A long, controlled breath. The kind of breath a man releases when he has been holding something and has finally decided it is not worth holding anymore. He looked at me. Not the way he had looked at me on Saturday. Not with that reflexive assessment that places a person into a category before they have even finished a sentence. This time, he looked at me with something closer to genuine attention. "You're right," he said quietly. "About all of it." He did not say more than that. Men like Reginald do not usually give extended apologies. They give acknowledgments, and then they move. I respected it, even if it was not everything it should have been. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing the project scope. Dwight walked through our capacity numbers. I walked through the site assessment I had pulled together over the weekend because I had seen the development proposal 8 months earlier, and even after the inquiry went quiet, I had never fully stopped thinking about it. By the time Reginald's team left, we had a framework for a formal contract discussion. Dwight waited until their car pulled out of the lot. Then he turned to me and said, "You had the site assessment ready." "I did it Saturday night," I said, "after we got home." He shook his head. "The building doesn't care who built it," I told him. "It either stands or it doesn't." Isaac called me that evening. He had heard from Camille, who had heard from her father, that the meeting had happened and that things had gone, in Reginald's words, unexpectedly well. "What did you do, Dad?" Isaac asked. "I had a business meeting," I said. He was quiet for a moment. "Camille feels terrible about the nameplate," he said. "She didn't know before Saturday. She's asking if she can call you." "She doesn't need to call me," I said. "She married my son. That's all I need from her." "Dad, Isaac," I said. I let a beat pass. "You are a good man. You have always been a good man." That did not come from a classroom. It came from sitting at a kitchen table in Warner Robins, doing homework with a father who did not always understand the problems, but always stayed until they were done. I paused. Do not let anyone tell you that where you come from is a limitation. You came from someone who showed up. That is an advantage, son. Not everyone has it. He did not say anything for a few seconds. Then he said, I love you, Dad. I love you too, I said. Now go be with your wife. The Caldwell construction contract with Worthington Capital Group was signed 6 weeks later. The Warner Robins mixed-use corridor project broke ground on the county deadline exactly as required. It was the largest single contract in my company's history. Reginald Worthington and I have had perhaps a dozen professional interactions since then. He is not warm. He is probably never going to be warm. But he is respectful, and in business, respect is the currency that actually matters. Constance sent me a note through Camille about 3 months after the wedding, a handwritten card, more than I expected from her, honestly. She wrote that she hoped we could start fresh. I kept the card. I have not responded to it. I may eventually. I have not decided. Some things do not need to be rushed. Isaac and Camille are doing well. They are figuring out what every young couple eventually has to figure out. Marriage is not an event. It is a practice. It is something you show up to every single day and do the work. I think Isaac understands that better than most. He learned it watching someone do it alone for 23 years. Last week, I drove out to a job site on the east side of Warner Robins. It was a new commercial development, a medical complex we are building for a regional healthcare group. I stood at the edge of the site in my boots watching my crew work, watching a foundation take shape from a bare piece of red Georgia clay. And I thought about a nameplate in Bluffton, South Carolina. I thought about what it feels like to be called something in front of people who are laughing. I thought about what it means to sit still, to breathe, and to wait. My father used to say, the field doesn't care who planted it. It grows what was put in the ground. I never fully understood what he meant until I was older. Until I understood that every callus, every early morning, every bill paid, every problem solved, and every child fed is something you put into the ground. It does not disappear. It grows. You do not need a credential to be real. You do not need their approval to be worth something. You do not need anyone to acknowledge what you built for it to stand. The buildings are still there. My son is still my son. And no nameplate, no matter whose hands printed it, changes either one of those things. Honestly, that nameplate did not just make me angry. It broke my heart a little. Because I had done nothing wrong. I had shown up. I had raised my boy alone. I had built something real with my bare hands. And on the one day I was supposed to sit down, breathe, and be proud of my son, they put a label in front of me like I was a problem to be managed. But here's what I keep coming back to. I did not need the room to change. I just needed Monday morning to come. And it did. So if someone in your life is trying to hand you a label, not educated enough, not successful enough, not polished enough, not the right kind of person, remember this. Labels are paper. What you have built is concrete. They always need someone like me, eventually. And when they do, make sure your price is right.